Start your morning with insights and drive. It's the business sit down where ideas come alive. From boardrooms to breakthroughs, we cover it all. Of FS Business School, standing tall. Sit down, tune in, let the wisdom flow. Talk, big moves, and the knowledge to grow. On your way to work, we're paving the way. The business sit down will set ablaze.
In this episode, we dive into an often overlooked topic of retirement preparation with Prof. Tini Kraus, retired dean and strategic expert who has shifted from a corporate world into a fulfilling life with hands-on hobbies like welding, building and gardening. With a career built on strategic thinking, Prof. Kraus shares his insights on how to approach retirement planning, not just financially, but in terms of finding purpose and staying active. Whether you're years away from retirement or just beginning to think about it, this conversation will offer valuable advice on how to prepare for the life's transition and make the most out of time after the office. Tune in for a mix of practical advice, personal stories, and a light-hearted look at what life looks like after retirement. Prof, I've got a question. With such a distinguished academic career in strategy as well as in academia, what led you to decide to go into retirement, as well as how did you prepare for that, for the transition specifically?
Okay. Maybe I have to start by saying I'm retired now, as you've said. Goodbye tension, hello pension. Okay. To retire, why retire? Maybe something tongue in the cheek as well. I got an aptitude test and the outcome clearly indicates that the best work opportunity for me was to retire. Okay. But put that aside. Thank you for having me. But I have to tell you that the university and the policy of the university is that you can retire at age 65. But in my late 50s, I've decided maybe I had to consider the possibility of earlier retirement, not continue until the age of 65. So the university gave me the opportunity to work and to be myself with the how can I put it? The proverbial sound of the music in my life, sound of my heart. So why retire at 65? Because of the fact that I see too many people nowadays also who are staying in a job till they are sort of forced to retire. And somebody once said the best time to consider retirement is when before your boss does. So I've decided I would like to do something new in this new phase of my life awaiting me after retirement, while I still have the physical ability and the mental ability to grab new opportunities and to think about things that can really add value to my life, because that's important. Through my whole life in the profession or wherever I was working was one of, it must be joyful and I must contribute something to other people's lives. So if I retire, what can I do that can give me joy and I can be dedicated to explore and to do new things? So that's the reason why I decided maybe I have to take it before 65 and retire before the age of 65.
Now, Prof, I've had the privilege of visiting you at your home and seeing how all your projects you've done after retirement, and I've often wondered, and I think this is a good time to ask this. Retirement is often seen as a time for rest, but you've been busy with hands-on projects from welding to gardening to cooking. You're a specialist in strategy, and I'm just curious, how does the lessons you've learned in your strategy or strategic thinking, how did this influence your decision while retirement? Do you think there's a certain level of strategic thinking you need to do when you're retiring? And I'm just curious, how do you go from a specialist in strategy all the way to being so hands-on, busy with your hands?
I can come back to that question in a minute. Just want to say something, and that is that I see too often that people, maybe I have to start by saying, there's an old saying that age doesn't warn you. It creeps on you, and it is in the background, and you're not aware of the fact that you're getting older and older. But on the other hand, retirement is going with older age, okay, with aging. And retirement, you can prepare for retirement, because the mistake many people make, and we can come back to that, is that they are waiting till that morning after they've said goodbye to him or her the previous night. So in my case, it was a question of, yes, I have to do things as I've said already. To come to the strategy part, of course, yes, without doubt, it's part of that. Because what is strategy? Strategy is all about a roadmap, a long-term roadmap. And we all know from strategy in business, in any organization, the roadmap is important, because if there are some delays on the road or cul-de-sacs, etc., you can take an alternative route. And the problem that we have with a lot of retirees, and I've seen that with some of my former colleagues as well and other people, they wait till that particular morning they woke up in a black hole of loneliness, asking the question, am I worth anything to anybody anymore? Because I was the main chicken in the chicken pen. They've praised me last night for my vision and the way I was acting in the office, the way I was thinking about new things, my wisdom, etc. And now nobody really wants me anymore. So here I am. What am I going to do now? And that's way too late. That's why people are aging at a tempo that you don't want them to age. And then they become disillusioned and distressed. And they really, you can see that they are really aging. They don't have any real interest anymore, etc. So back to the strategy thing, it's a question of yes, and everything I'm going to say today, you're going to ask me something, is I'm not trying to tell people what to do.
Yes.
What I'm going to share with you is what I've done. But retrospectively, if you go into the literature, you'll find many of these things with fancy names. Okay? So if I can come back to the strategy thing, think about strategy. The old simple thing, and everybody's done that one time. I don't think they do it anymore because it's outdated, but it's still very valid. Is the old SWOT analysis. You remember that? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And that's exactly what's going to happen in retirement. If you don't think about these things beforehand, you'll end up in a cul-de-sac. Okay? So, if I can tell you what I've done and what I've experienced, it's something like the following. You can sort of break it down into 3 or 4 main points. The first one is pre-retirement. It's a very important part, and it's not starting the month before you retire. It's starting years before you retire, because you have to sort of position yourself in terms of many things. Pre-retirement, things like, or questions like, where am I going to live? Now, most people retiring in Bloemfontein, not most, but many people retiring in Bloemfontein, they're down to the coast. Okay, it's Hartenbos is Bloemfontein number 2 in holiday time, so I'm going to Hartenbos, I'm going to retire there. Okay, do that, it's fine, you can do that. Where are you going to live? What are you going to do that will give you a kick, a constant kick in life? What are you going to do to retain the spark in your life? Because now I'm away, nobody, as I've said, some people experience, nobody really wants me anymore. But what can I do so that people can want me or use me again, so to speak? So pre-retirement phase is extremely important to think about all these questions. Do I have hobbies? If I don't have a hobby, am I going to get a hobby? Or, and a very important thing that people, especially in academia, are doing, I said, no, I'm not going to do it, is to continue serving on a contract basis at the university as long as they are allowed to do that, as visiting professors, etc., etc. And they are constantly doing research in the field of study, etc. But it's a personal sort of taste that you have. I had my share. I had to make a very ground-moving decision in 1999. I was elected as the dean of a faculty. And I knew at that stage, becoming a dean at that stage of the biggest faculty on the campus was a fatal shot for my research career. I couldn't do research anymore. It was really a question of hands-on management of the Faculty of Management Sciences. So I decided I'm not going to do research. Many of my colleagues are still busy doing research, and they are doing wonderful things because that's a lot of knowledge that you can share with other people, and you can expand on that, etc., etc. I had the privilege to go and teach abroad after retirement and things like that. So I was still involved in the business school as well as a mentor, etc. But then at one stage, and I'll come to the second part in a minute. So if your decision is to stay involved in the industry that you are in one or other way, as a mentor or as a soundboard or whatever you'd like to call that, do it. But that's what I'm talking about. Pre-retirement. You also have to think about post-retirement at that stage, because the pre-retirement tells you something about what's going to happen after retirement. Pre-retirement, retirement, and post-retirement. And I would like to rename retirement. Let's call it rewirement. You have to rewire your mind and say, but I have to go to think differently. I will not be longer in a deadly routine from day to day, trying to be the fastest rat in the race. So somewhere along the line, I have to scale down on that part. But maybe in my current industry, I can still be of use, given my experience and my wisdom and things like that. So the pre-retirement phase is crucial and must start years before you get to that particular point. Because if you are thinking about retiring somewhere else, in other words, moving with your spouse, etc., there will be implications for that, okay, to the children, etc., etc. So that's the pre-retirement phase. Then, and then the second one is the retirement itself. Now, I read about this. They call it the so-called honeymoon phase of retirement. So you will enter a honeymoon phase. Now, hopefully you'll enjoy the honeymoon phase on retiring. What am I talking about? You are going to do those things that you always want to do. You're going to travel with your spouse. You're going to visit your family and other acquaintances more. You're going to accompany your wife if she's going shopping, but please don't make a fool of yourself in the shop. I can tell you many stories about that, because that's one of my favorite pastimes nowadays, to go with Ia to the shop and then say, continue, be calm, I will sit here at the coffee shop and then I'll watch the people. And I make stories about the people I watch. Okay, but that's not what I'm talking about. So if that is part of your honeymoon phase, do it. If it is my time now and it's my privilege to look after the grandkids, by all means. But the honeymoon phase will fade away somewhere along the line. So one even plan for the honeymoon phase, but not that intensively. You know, because I'm going to wake up later in the morning and I will have my own day. I always say I do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. Nobody can tell me anymore, do it now. So I do it like that. But that phase will fade away. Okay. So you must be ready, because the third one is disenchantment. It's a shock to many people, because then they realize, but I don't have a plan to go forward. Strategy, long-term roadmap. Including in that roadmap will be goals. So one goal was to say, I will take time out, if I can call it that, after retirement. And the time out will involve things on the spur of the moment. If I wake up in the morning during the honeymoon phase, say, for example, and I think it's time that we go and see the big hole in Kimberley, for example. Let's get in the car and have breakfast along the way, or whatever the case. That's part of the honeymoon phase. But you can go only so far. And for some people, the end of the honeymoon phase, the so-called arrival, or let's call it the pop-up of the disenchantment phase, is a total shock. To think about it is not fun anymore, to do nothing. One of my friends who retired also more or less the same time, his wife told the story. She said, after a month, she said, what are you going to do now, today? He said, nothing. She said, but you did nothing yesterday. He said, but I'm not ready, I'm not finished yet with doing nothing. And we've already said goodbye to him. He's resting somewhere in a Dennis or whatever the case is. So, disenchantment is not fun anymore to do things like this. And that's the critical one. That's the critical one. What's going to happen now? So this is the time for re-energizing yourself. So if it was part of your initial pre-retirement thoughts, it's easy to make this 180 degree or 90 degree move or whatever. Maybe it's time that you think about then start a hobby. Although it's late already, it's 2 years maybe down the line after retirement. In my case, it was a question of 3 months after retirement to tackle my hobby that I worked on for many, many years. That's the welding part. And it's diversity that's important within that disenchantment phase. So it's not only one thing that you're going to do now that's new. There must be other things. Maybe it's a question of retraining. And we have many examples, especially in a country like America, where people after 70 got trained as dentists. In our country, it's not possible. But we have other possibilities. We have more possibilities and opportunities in South Africa that many people realize we have. So what are the retraining about? What am I going to be retrained for? Is it something that I can do with my hand, or something that I can use as a mentor to help people, to assist people in terms of that? We're sitting with a really a vast lot of wisdom and knowledge in the country that is lost. People retired and they lock themselves up. Because, as you've said, people see retirement as rest. Yes, okay, it is rest to a certain extent. But how long are you going to sit and rest and sulk and irritate your wife or your husband? Somewhere along the line you have to get up, man. Get up and do something. Because as long as the Father is giving you the opportunity to breathe, okay, you can be something to somebody. And I like to quote my mother as an example. My mother was in an old age home for the last 10 years of her life. She couldn't get up from bed, but she was the main person in that setup where even the staff members came to get encouragement. So you need to be able to participate in the mid-mile swimming that, or doing the comrades, or going down to the Argus. That was nice, I've done that as well. But that's enough. There are other things also to do. Be careful as a retiree not to get into that old thing of it's a routine and I can't take it anymore. Same day, same story. There must be something that will give me the kick back into my life. But I have to read you what I've said here, something like, I'm talking about the so-called 4 R's, the 4 R's. If I talk about serious reorientation, it's about rediscover. I think anybody with a sound mind can remember how wonderful it was as a kid to discover something. Wow, look at this. Okay. But as the years are going on and we are getting older, and then you get at the old age sort of time, senior time, whatever the case, rediscover. There are things that you can rediscover. I'm very fond of gardening my whole life, because my grandmother was my role model in that sense. My mother's garden was always something to see, a picture. Like the Garden of Eden, I call it. I was always fond of gardening, and I think the old people would say this was typical guy born with green hands. But it was wonderful to rediscover the wonder of scarce and exotic plants that I can propagate in my own garden. People learn, they said something about relearning. And then there's nothing wrong to relive. Maybe it's time, as a retiree, to do some research on your family. Where do you come from? When did your first ancestor arrive in Africa? I can tell you my first ancestor arrived in South Africa in 1717. So I'm from here, not from Europe. I'm from here. If I go abroad and I came back, it's like coming home. Okay? But the same principle applies to anybody in South Africa. Where did your grandparents come from? Maybe they immigrated here from some place that nobody is thinking about. And the other one is that of rewirement. You have to rewire yourself. You ask questions. Should I stop now for a minute?
No, we can continue. That's why I invited Prof. It's always interesting to sit and have a conversation with Prof. The majority of the stuff I wanted to ask Prof has already answered. So I'm going to maybe delve a bit into. Prof used to be the dean of the faculty. During the interview, you mentioned this, and for me, when I met Prof the first time, was extremely interesting because there's a certain perspective on if someone used to be a dean or academic, that you think that they'll just sit at home doing research, that there's not the let's say the hands-on approach to retirement. And I was very impressed, as I've said earlier, with Prof's garden as well as the welding projects I've seen. But during Prof's career as the dean of the faculty, what was one of the memories that stood out the most to you in general?
I'll tell you in a couple of seconds. My study is still my haven. All the books that I've used in my life and read in my life is still there. It's like a library, and it's still my haven. That's the place where I can get a grip on myself in terms of my mental abilities. Okay, although the work as such in the garden and welding and whatever the case is, and cooking, whatever, is important for mental ability as well. But that one incident, I can quote you a date. 23rd of March 1988. Mr. Ad Anderson graduated that day, receiving the BCom honors in business economics. Why am I using that as an example? Mr. Ad Anderson was the chief executive officer of the then Bankoffs Bank, that amalgamated together with Absa and all those others at one stage. He was the CEO till the early 1980s. Okay. Then in 1984, he was diagnosed with the motor neuron disease, and I met him in 1986 when he enrolled for a BCom honors degree. It was his dream all his life as a businessman to get a postgraduate degree. But he was sitting in a chair with life support pipes and wires and you name it all over him. And we as a department decided we will assist this man by going to him in his house, in his living room, while his wife is also there, because he couldn't communicate verbally like we are communicating right now. He was representing what he would like to present graphically, and with the help of his wife with language assistance. So I was the guinea pig. I started the sessions with Ad Anderson in 1986 in February. So I visited him once a week for 2 to 3 hours, and we discussed what I normally discuss the previous night with the students attending the lectures. And I've arranged with the students, they visited him the next evening, and in his presence he also participated in group discussions, case studies and things like that. Okay, that's the background. So Ad completed his studies in 1987, and on the 23rd of March 1988 it was graduation ceremony, and it was something to witness. It was the first time in history of the university that the then Chancellor of the University get off the stage and awarded Ad his honors in business economics while he was sitting there, they wheeled him in just a couple of minutes before his name was called to award the degree. He was on life support. He was sitting there receiving his degree, and a standing ovation from the rest of the Kali Iman. That date is engraved in here. It's amazing. Without moaning, without whimpering, it left a legacy in many people's minds, in mine especially. That's why I quote this particular date. Unfortunately, passed away a couple of months after that graduation ceremony. But fact of the matter is, he achieved one of his goals, of his long-term goals. He never thought about getting this disease. It wasn't part of his roadmap. But as I said earlier today, if your roadmap is well formulated, long-term goals, etc., and the long-term goal was to get an honors in business economics, but oh goodness me, now I can't walk anymore, I can't participate. But there was another route to get to that end goal, and this is the message I would like to convey to all people, not only to people who are on the brink of retirement or whatever the case is. Because, Philip, if you think about it, when I was teaching, still was teaching, one of my favorite topics was the knowledge doing gap, and involve students in thinking about this and talking about this and doing research about that. As an example, if I wake up every morning and I feel there's a funny lump somewhere in my body, the right thing to do is to go to your GP, but we don't do it, especially men.
Yeah.
We don't do it until that day when it is a death sentence.
Yeah.
It's the same in business, it's the same with retirement, the knowledge doing gap. And the gap between what we know we should do and what we do is increasing as the world is picking up speed. If you think about the world today, it's totally different than it was 5 years ago. So if you don't address the knowledge doing gap, in other words, you know you're going to retire, why on earth wait till the day that you say, bye-bye, it was nice working with you? What's the legacy that you leave behind? And I'm not doing something to leave a legacy, but people will always say, what difference is he making at this stage, or was he making at that stage? So you asked me a particular one, I've mentioned it, is 28th. Then the other thing that you said in terms of what I've learned now after retirement is patience. People who know me better, or people who knew me a couple of years ago, they can recall that I was a really impatient person. Patience. And I've learned not to force myself to be patient. I can become patient myself. That old thing that we have in South Africa, mostly in South Africa, it must be done yesterday. Okay, I understand that. But fact of the matter is, get the facts. Why are things not happening the way you would like them to happen? Maybe there's something that's, and it's right. Let's query some things, but get patience in terms of your decision making. One of my previous colleagues, it's terrible now. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer, but he always told me, before you put your hand on paper or on the keyboard to write somebody an email and get rid of some steam, just think about it. My mother said, take a mouthful of cold water. If you are angry, count till 10, and if it's boiling, then you can get to somebody. But if it is boiling, swallow the water and go on with life. Okay.
I've had a few times where I think the water would have been turning into steam. I've got, Prof, I think you've had a lot of experience. You've lived which I think a very interesting life during conversations we've had while I was visiting you a while ago. But I've always wondered that if you could have, let's say, dinner or spend a day with someone who was historical in your retirement, who would it be and why? Any historical figure?
Difficult. Can I use 3?
You can give me 100 if you want.
I will give you 3. The first one is Peter Drucker. As an ex-student in my field, you will know who Peter Drucker is. I would like to have a sit down with coffee with Peter Drucker and get a conversation with him in terms of the development of management as a science, because he's the guru, he's the main guru of the management gurus. In reading his books, all of them, I have them in my study, I've realized there's nobody more knowledgeable, there was nobody more knowledgeable in the modern times than Peter Drucker. So that would be my first one. You can get the drift. I'm still in my mind busy with the management and the strategy and things like that. If I can invite a second person, that would be Moses from the Bible. He's, in my mind, the most renowned hands-on leader and manager in history. To get all those Jews out of Egypt, okay, and try to keep them together, okay, but God helped him. But fact of the matter is, Moses was the chosen one.
Yes.
Okay, and as a chosen one, what did he do? How did he really get along? And I've always told my students in the undergraduate classes, he's a very good example of how to delegate. Asking his brother-in-law to come and help him and things like that. So Moses is the second one. And the third one is Jesus. If I can have a morning with him to get first-hand advice, and I tell you advice in terms of what? How to be a proper servant leader. We don't have proper servant leaders in our country anymore, and we don't have them in the world anymore. If you look what's happening in America right now, it's not servant leadership. Jesus was a servant leader. How do you stay a servant leader from a position of authority? Because that's where the problem is coming in. The moment people get authority, they think they are above the law. And now, if I say jump, you ask how high must I jump? It was not the case with him. How do I serve from a position of authority?
Now, my last question to Prof is, as I've mentioned a few times, that Prof is a expert in strategy. But after retirement, you pivoted completely over to hands-on skills. What's one skill you learned after retirement that you never thought in a million years you would either learn or be able to master?
That's the most difficult question. I'm tempted to say how to cook. I don't think that's what I'm going to do, because I'm the cook in the house now, and it's wonderful. It's like a hobby. It's not work. My wife always said, they say, no man, dis nie werk nie. It's lekker. It's nice. Yes, it's a difficult one. I think leniency towards everybody that I meet on a daily basis or whatever I'm doing. Patience, I've said patience already. It's a difficult one. I don't think I've learned. I think what I've done since retirement was to sort of polish some of the things that I've done when I was a dean and acting deputy vice chancellor. That was a school I went through that learned me a lot of these things that I'm doing currently, because I had to tone down certain things. I couldn't do all the things that the way I've done it before I come to a management position or something like that. I would say that's more or less that, and of course my ability now to do ornamental welding. That is, I don't have enough time to do that, but that will be it's part of the long-term spread.
As a closing question, I know I said the previous one was the last one, but I just thought of a question that I'd like to ask Prof. Prof has served in a variety of leadership positions. What is one leadership skill that Prof would advise someone who is either a up-and-coming leader or someone who's an up-and-coming manager who'd like to be, as you say, a servant leader or a leader that makes a difference? Because at the end of the day, we all want leaders, managers to lead but also make an impact or leave a legacy?
That old saying, follow me, I'm right behind you. That's a servant leader. My good friend Kutis Kutsia, he once told me, if you would like, just after I became dean, if you would like to become a better leader, serve your management team first and tell them to serve their people first. That's why I've always, at the university, even when I was, as I've said, acting deputy vice chancellor, had a problem with the computer. The computer services was like this in my office. I said, no. There's a misunderstanding. It's a huge misunderstanding. Why did my colleague in the Economics 1 class yesterday ask you to help and you didn't help him? My staff is first and I'm second. Okay. So help my staff to be more competent and to do the job properly, and enable them to be trained and retrained and rewired, etc., etc. Create the opportunity in your entity what you are responsible for people to excel and to become better and to rewire themselves. They will give you the satisfaction, because in the end you will be measured by your seniors, by what they, your subordinates, achieved. The better they perform, the better you will appear in front of the people if you do a presentation at the end of the year or during strategic planning sessions, etc. Otherwise, you stand there and you like a fish on dry land, because you have nothing to report, because the people are lazy. That's what people are saying. They are lazy. They are not. You can't rely on them. It's not true. Tell me something about what's a training program that you have for your desk staff, the back office. How do you train your back office? Think about the university. It's a complex entity. The whole university is a complex entity. Are we training the people correctly? I have to say this. When I get to the end of my term as a dean, I wasn't at retirement stage. And I've asked the rector at that stage, Professor Jonathan Jansen, is it possible that I can keep on, but not in the faculty as such, but at the business school? And his question was, to do what? And I said, it's very simple. I would like to start a training and empowerment program for heads of academic departments, because I saw that on a daily basis at the university. The heads of academic departments don't have the faintest clue what management's all about. Think about this, Philip. You are at the business school yourself. People are using the words entrepreneurship, management, decision making, corporate governance, like this, but they don't have the faintest clue what they're talking about. Because one rector once told me, management is not, it doesn't belong on the university. It's common sense. But he made a mess because he can't manage. He don't know the basic principles of management. Sorry, now I'm sort of overstepping now. Fact of the matter is training. If you would like to be the best leader and the best manager, train your people first, and then you yourself must be in constant development in terms of what are your weak points, because all of us do have some weak point somewhere. Mine was impatience at one stage, etc., etc. But I would like to conclude, if I may, with a quote by Mark Twain, who said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do by the ones that you did do. And it's the same with leadership, same with retirement. Do it now. Sometime you have to say, I would say, get up. Get up. If you are on the brink of retirement, think about it, tell yourself, and then say it out loud to your spouses and your friends, etc. I will be retiring on the 31st of December 2026. And then you can start planning according to that, and they will assist you in getting that long-term roadmap. Thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful to be back on the campus, and thank you that I can go home now.
Thank you very much, Prof's time. I appreciate it a lot. And I really, really hope the people listening and watching find this as interesting as I did. And I hope that we can maybe call on Prof again for a future conversation, whether it be strategy, whether it be hand skills or something. But I'd really like to invite Prof again in the future.
Thank you, Philip. You're welcome.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, have a good day.
Start your morning with insights and drive. It's the business sit down.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, share this with friends and family, and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Of FS Business School, standing tall. Sit down, tune in, let the wisdom flow. Real talk, big moves, and the knowledge to grow. On your way to work, we're paving the way. The business sit down will set a blaze.